What it do, guys? It's D'Anthony here, man, aka Hoodscout, back again for another edition of the Hoodscout podcast. And this is really a unique podcast, a podcast like no other. We're going to have athletes, we're going to have coaches, we're going to have intellectuals, we're going to have media members of all sorts. And don't forget, guys, to like this podcast, share this podcast, and help grow this podcast. This is not just my podcast. This is also your podcast. And the only reason it's going to grow is because you guys are going to be invested in it, guys. Sit back, get your beverage of choice ready, get your popcorn ready, get your dinner ready, get your steak ready, get your vegan meal ready. Tune in, guys. Hoodscout. Peace. Hey, what it do, guys? Hoodscout back again for another edition of the Hoodscout podcast. Keeping up with this month, which is the end of February, still Black History Month. I talked to a sister from Low County area, and that's in South Carolina. I don't know if you guys ever heard of the Gullahs, the Gullah Geechee community. But if you didn't, sit back and listen to this one, and you're probably gonna learn something. Some stuff that I didn't even know as it relates to the history of those within this country. So sit back, share this podcast, like this podcast. Let's keep this momentum going. Take care, guys, and God bless. Peace. Hey, what it do, guys? Hoodscout here, back again for another edition of the Hoodscout podcast, where we're blending sports and education and history and all these type of things. And today I got a guest from the East Coast. And like we always do, without further ado, introduce yourself, tell the people who you are and where you're from.
Hi, I'm Luana M Graves Sellars. I am from Hilton Head, South Carolina in the Low Country, and I have a website called Low Country Gullah.
So, and a lot of people don't, well, let me just speak for myself. I didn't know about the Gullah community and people until probably about 2 years ago. And believe it or not, my forefather is actually from North Carolina. And I think many African Americans have their roots there as well. But talk to me about that growing up, where you from in that area, and what was the culture like?
Well, basically, I'm a lot like you. Growing up, I grew up in New York on Long Island, and I had family in New York City. And so growing up, I had two aunts that would always kind of randomly say, I'm a Geechee, but they never told me what a Geechee was. And at one point, I met someone who was a Gullah, but I didn't really know what that was either. So fast forward to just a few years ago, I have started doing a lot of genealogy research. And it turns out, I moved to Hilton Head, and I always knew that I had family in Ravenel, South Carolina. But not until I moved here about 6 years ago did I realize that my Ravenel, South Carolina family, are the Gullah connection that I have. And so between me moving to Hilton Head and learning some of the history and culture and everything that is everything Gullah, that's kind of where Low Country Gullah came from, because a lot of people don't realize, like you and me, that they are Gullah. And research has found that 89% of Black Americans who are descendants of slaves are Gullah.
Wow.
I know, it's mind-blowing. It's totally mind-blowing.
Oh, let me just stop you. I almost got emotional. And now this, I'm not being funny. Wow. I want you to repeat that again, because that really hit me, and I got a little choked up. Repeat that again.
So anyone who is a Black American in the United States that has their roots coming from enslavement in the United States, 89% of those people are from the Gullah Geechee culture. And of that, 1% of them can attribute their beginnings in the United States to South Carolina. Wow. So it's mind-blowing. And to be honest, that's what fuels what I do. Because like you and like me, I didn't know. And I always grew up, do you call yourself African American? Do you call yourself Black American? Like, who am I? What am I? Mm-hmm. And so I didn't know, and I always gravitated to Black American, not African American, because I'm like, Africa where? Africa
Mm-hmm.
who? Like,
Mm-hmm.
is
Yeah.
there a tribe? Is there a
Yeah.
country? I mean,
Mm-hmm.
it's not a continent, it's a country and I couldn't identify it. So I just
Mm-hmm.
stuck with Black. But now I can, and you can say you're a Gullah Geechee American, which is it's huge because when I was in school, and they had International Day, and they would say, well, um, I'm Italian American, and I'm Chinese American, and I'm Irish American, or whatever. Black American is like, but that's a color. It's
Mm-hmm.
not a
Mm-hmm.
it's not a culture.
Mm-hmm.
So now that I know that it's a culture, I want to share it with everybody. And so that's where Low Country Gullah came from.
Man, this is gonna be so fun. I know I got another interview after this one. No, I can just tell like the energy, the knowledge, and we're gonna go so many different places with this. Let me ask you this: being in New York, correct?
Mm-hmm.
What did you see as the big difference from New York and the low country county area?
Well, I mean, you're talking North and South. So, culturally, there's a huge difference between living up north and living in the South. But, going back to both of my aunts who were always, proudly saying I'm a Geechee, I grew up with red rice, I grew up with okra, I grew up with a lot of cultural Gullah Geechee cultural things
Mm-hmm.
that they incorporated into my life. And not until now did I realize that I had been living as a Gullah Geechee all of my life. I just wasn't calling myself that or identifying that way. So it's really, one of those things, like say New Year's Eve, when you have Hoppin' John and cornbread for New Year's Day, and
Mm-hmm.
your first meal of the day, all of that is Geechee. All of that is Gullah Geechee traditions. There are just so many that are American, and so many Gullah words like tote bag and jukebox. Those are Gullah words,
Wow.
and like one pot meals like shrimp and grits. That's Gullah. One pot meals like a stew. That's
Mm-hmm.
Gullah, because they took what they had and they threw it in a pot, and that was dinner.
Mm-hmm.
So it's interesting that most people or most Black people in America have been living the Gullah Geechee lifestyle and culture and really don't even know it.
And you know what's so fascinating with that? Many of us in these big cities, like I'm in Dallas, Texas,
Mm-hmm.
but many of our grandparents may have been from East Texas or Central Texas, and then of course before that the Carolinas, and they migrated through the wars and different things. But that older generation, the way that they cook, whether it be the stews, whether it be the okra, like my great aunt loved okra. Do you think it's amazing how we still were connected even though we were disconnected? Do you think we were losing those food pathways with the newer generation?
Yes, and basically what happened is, after the Civil War, a lot of let me back up just so people have a better understanding of where Gullah Geechee,
Mm-hmm.
basically is. So the U.S. government has federally designated from Jacksonville, Florida, to Jacksonville, North Carolina, as the Gullah Geechee corridor. So
Mm-hmm.
from the coastline to 35 miles inland, that's the Gullah Geechee corridor. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
So if you have anybody who lives within there that you can trace your roots back to, you're definitely Gullah Geechee.
Mm-hmm.
Not to say that they all had to stay there, because after the Civil War, people scattered.
Mm-hmm.
They didn't want to stay in the South. A lot
Yep.
went north, a lot went west.
Mm-hmm.
So, you have a lot of people who just went wherever they went to.
Mm-hmm.
And to your point in your question, a lot of things just kind of got watered down. Granted, there are some traditions that keep going, like the
Mm-hmm.
okra and, the red
Mm-hmm.
rice and just ways of cooking and
Mm-hmm.
things like that. But, a lot of things stay the same. And because they stayed the same, it's those traditions and cultures that maintain themselves. Just like the watch night service. Most Black
Mm.
churches, come Christmas, not Christmas, New Year's Eve,
Mm-hmm.
they do the watch night service.
Yep.
Well, the history of the watch night service was that they were literally waiting or watching for word on New Year's Eve. Early, like during slavery, it was because on New Year's Day, a lot of slave holders, they would sell off their family, the slaves, when starting in a new year. Like it was
Mm.
a contractual thing. So
Wow.
that was the beginning of the watch night. And then when it came to emancipation in 1865, it was the watch night that we're free. So it's all part of the same thing. But that's Gullah. That's
Mm-hmm.
that's one of the Gullah traditions that everybody does it now.
Mm-hmm.
So it's commonplace, and a lot of things that are sorry about that.
No, you're fine. Go ahead.
A lot of things that are incorporated into Black culture, just like the Black church and
Mm-hmm.
religion.
Mm-hmm.
The church was where the Gullah receive their information. It's where we receive our information today.
Mm-hmm.
When someone is running for political office, the first place that they go, if they're going into the Black community, is the Black church,
Yep.
because that's the source of information. So there's just so many things that doesn't matter if you live in California. That when you know what the culture is and some of the things that the culture traditions and things like that, then you start putting those pieces together, and it's like it's all there.
Yeah. And California is really one of those historic places that many of those people came from the South. So as a people, we've migrated so much, but we're more similar and alike than we are not. Let's get into what is some of those Gullah traditions? What is some of those foods for the newer generation? Let me say this. I think for your generation, which is, a little bit older than me, it is so important for you guys to do the work, whether it's writing the books, writing the documentaries. The only reason I know that my forefather came from North Carolina is because I had a relative who has since passed away recently, wrote a book. Before she passed, she wrote a book on the family. And I don't know if a lot of our family really understand the importance of that, but some of the younger generation, like myself, and I see others on social media, God has given us a hunger to know where, and I see it kind of rising back up. So your work is very valuable, but I want to kind of hit on some of those traditional foods and traditional ways of Gullah for the people who are listening for the first time and maybe never heard of it before.
Well, what was really interesting about the culture is it was really a simple way of life.
Mm-hmm.
And, just to kind of back up a little bit more, the reason why the Gullah culture survived was because along the seacoast of the United States, you had all of these sea islands. And because a lot of them you couldn't get to with a car, the people who were living there, because a lot of the Confederates and the slave owners and all of that, they literally left the enslaved people behind.
Mm-hmm.
So they were able to maintain the culture. And so basically, with the culture, they lived off the land and the sea.
Mm-hmm.
So most of the foods were fish-based foods. And a lot of vegetables, sweet potatoes, butter beans, things like that. But the biggest one that I'll share with you is rice.
Mm-hmm.
That every dish had rice in it, because the coastline, because it's really hot and marshy and swampy, along the sea islands.
Yes, ma'am.
It was where the primary crop was rice. It wasn't cotton. Yes, there was sea island cotton and indigo that was farmed, by the plantations,
Mhm.
but rice was the primary crop, and it was the number one crop in the United States at one point. Not cotton, it was rice, and it became the number one crop based on the backs of the enslaved people that were stolen from West Africa, because the people who were here in the United States, they had the seed, but they couldn't figure out how to work it. So
Mhm.
what they did was they went to West Africa and got the Africans who were knowledgeable and very successful in growing rice,
Mhm.
and they brought them here. And so along the coastline, because it's swampy, because you have the ocean, which is the salt water, and then you have freshwater lakes and ponds and things like that. That's why rice really, really thrived here.
Mhm.
And so basically that's why rice was such a staple. And I'll just throw this in, and just so that you know, the waterways, and it's called the water trunk systems, that were created in order to hold back the salt water and let the rice develop in the fresh water, was so incredible in its technology that it is told that the power of them had the strength of the Hoover Dam,
Mhm.
and the technology of it was equivalent to the Egyptian pyramids. So that's the kind of stuff
Yeah.
that they, brought to America, and from there the crop just thrived, and made
Mhm.
a lot of people wealthy. Matter of fact, if you've ever had Carolina rice,
Mhm.
that was the seedling was called Carolina Gold, and there was one plantation owner. He made so much money, he named it Gold
Mhm.
after, because it was his gold, so to
Yeah.
speak. But rice is probably the biggest food that you would be familiar with.
Yeah. And it's fascinating when you're talking about whether it's sweet potatoes or candy yams or a lot of these foods we still, even though we lost some of it, we still eat without knowing that history. And it is my belief that if the youth can understand the history, I think that will swell in us a righteous pride that because when you don't know it, you kind of discombobulate a little bit. And I'm gonna tell you a funny thing. I want to take up fishing recently. We're in these cities, man. We're so cityfied where we don't do a lot of those things they did in the quote unquote country. But I told my cousin yesterday of something fascinating. When we was on the fishing alley at Walmart, we would see African American men come in time and time again, and they were so knowledgeable about fishing. Me and my cousin in our 20s, well, we're 30 now, but we were kind of like, hey, what do we do with this? And how do we catch this? Those guys knew this stuff like the back of their head. And what it told me was, we need to start telling them to use some of this stuff because
Yes.
the elders know it. Like that's like an ingrained craft. I asked one guy, so you're a fisherman? He said, man, I'm out there anytime I get, from the creek to the this, that. And you look at him, if you look at him, you would judge him and say, he don't know what he's talking about. But he told us what we need to fish, what type of rod we need, what we want to catch, what type of bait is. And I know that originated from those areas,
Yes.
and it was so powerful for me because I don't think that stereotype is out there, but our men are fishermen. They knowledge about these things. And I just think it's so important. Do you think that's important for the youth to understand that power of that history?
Absolutely, absolutely. And just so that you know, when traditionally, you were talking about, rod and a reel in fishing. The traditional way of fishing that was used is called a cast net. So they
Mm,
would take a huge net and part of the culture is that someone, usually the men, were weaving those nets, and they would stand on the boat and throw the net, and then pull it back in, and that was the catch. Or they would go shrimping or crabbing, in the waters. But absolutely, it's important for everybody to be able to not only know about things like that, so that they know what the history and the culture is, and where it all comes from. It's nothing is random.
Mm-hmm.
Nothing is random. Everything came from somewhere, and that way of fishing, all of that is African tradition.
It is.
It's all in the African tradition. Just it's just a question of where in Africa,
Mm-hmm.
and of the different countries, there were probably about 7 to 10 on the west coast of Africa. So, the largest amount of people came from Angola,
Uh-huh.
which some people say is how the word Gullah came about.
Mm-hmm.
It's like a derivative, and there
Mm-hmm.
was a Gullah tribe in West Africa as well. So, I mean, that's where it comes from. But it's all connected. It's all connected. It's just a question of how and what and and where.
Mm-hmm. So you say you got this thing to really understand about the Gullahs. Did you say about 6 years ago, 7 years ago, or was it longer than that?
That's it.
Okay.
That's it.
What was the mindset? What was the spiritual that made you want to do that? And then walk me through that process.
Well, you know what? It's really one of those God stories,
Mhm.
because I didn't plan to do this at all.
Okay.
I was really looking for something to do.
Mhm.
My mother had just retired. I had a death in the family, and so I decided to stay with my mother. And so I wasn't planning to move to Hilton Head, none of that.
Okay.
And so I was looking for something to do while I was here with her. And I just happened to be in the car with her one day, and we were passing a magazine, and a local magazine. And so I said, let's pull in and let's see, I have a sales background. So I'm like, maybe I could sell the magazine, because, I've been in advertising for a long time. And so they're like, well, we don't need anybody to sell the magazine, but we could use always some freelance writers. Now, mind you, I have a degree in journalism and Black history, but I hated writing
Okay.
as a child. And, I mean, I didn't like the technical aspect of it. So, but I said, what are you doing for Black History Month? And and this was like in November. And they said, well, we haven't even thought about it. I said, let me do it. I'll do it.
Mm-hmm.
They didn't know me. They didn't know if I could write. I could have written the cat is in the
Yeah.
hat. It's
Yep.
black and it's fat.
Mhm.
And, So anyway, so I started doing the research and whatnot. And I wrote 6 articles, and 8,500 words later, I had not only the largest section of the magazine, but they made the focus of the magazine the Gullah culture and put it on the cover.
Wow.
And it turned out that it was the largest selling edition that they had ever had, and had actually gone into reprint because people started hoarding the magazine and shipping it to their friends and family everywhere, like
Wow.
around the country and even around the world. And so after that, they were like, okay, what else can you do? So I was like,
Wow.
so I started writing every month. And the first column that I had, in addition to just keep writing, general stories and traditions and things like that, I started writing about the first families of Hilton Head, and literally taking the history from the original, like, patriarch in the family line, from them all the way to current people who are living on the island, and doing that history and tracing it back. And that became like a really popular column for them.
Mhm.
And so I wrote about 15 of those. And I mean, since then, I've just been writing, and every day, people had been asking me, where can I get this article? Where can I get that? And so instead of sending it to the magazine's website, I said, I might as well start my own website. So I did. And that's where Low Country Gullah came in. And I've been writing ever since. And, when I got that aha moment for me, when I was just like, wow, I have a history and a culture and a people, and I can trace my roots. You know, I may not know the specific tribe or place in Africa where I can go, but I know that my great 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 grandfather, my grandmother's great great grandfather, that he was in Charleston and escaped, made his way to Beaufort, joined the U.S. colored troops, the Union Army, during the Civil War, and he was in Hilton Head. And again, so now I'm walking on the ground that he walked on, you know, and so it's things like that. And I have to tell you this because it's another mind-blowing thing, that that Hilton Head, not only was the Union Army here, but and because they were here, enslaved people from everywhere. It was like a mecca, you know. I know the army's there, I can be free, I'm on my way, kind of thing. And so because of that, they didn't know what to do with tens of thousands of slaves who were willing to just sit down and say, I'm safe, you know, I'm free. So what happened was, one of the generals said, you know, there was a lot of chaos. And he said, you know what? It would be really funny if we gave all of these formerly enslaved people, and this is before the Emancipation Proclamation, a plantation that was, you know, where enslaved people worked, and gave them their own town. So it's called Mitchellville. And so it was a complete town. It had its own government. It had its own tax structure. It had its own schools and a hospital and retail stores. And it was the first place for compulsory education in South Carolina. And in order to get in the town, if you were not Black, you needed a pass. I mean, they were totally.
Oh, wow.
This is 1862, 3 years before emancipation, and just to protect the town, the general had a Fort Howell, built at the head of the town to protect it in case the Confederates decided to come in and raid it or whatever. So, you know, even if you can't go to Africa or whatever, so many people were in Mitchellville. You know what I'm saying? So many people were in the Gullah Geechee corridor that it grounds you.
Yeah.
It gives you roots. It gives you roots that you may never have had or may never have thought that you could have had. And it's mind-blowing.
It's amazing because we haven't spoke a lot before this, but I know for sure that my forefather fought in the war, and I think I'm not sure the exact history of it, but it was, I think, from North Carolina to Tennessee, and you know they've obviously migrated to Texas, but he was literally in that area in that wartime that you're speaking of. So that kind of speaks to the truth of what you're saying. I want you to give people your website again. And I want to continue this. What I want to talk about, do you know, was it very common to have many African American towns at that time, like throughout that area? Oh,
No.
It wasn't. Okay.
No, because this was before emancipation, essentially Black people, they didn't have a legal standing.
Okay.
They weren't, you know, they're the whole 3/5 of a man and all of that. So during the war, they were called contraband because essentially someone else owned them, you know, owned the enslaved person, and the Union Army had them. So technically, just like something you would kind of steal or something of somebody else's, they called them contraband. So there weren't a lot of towns like that. Mitchellville was the first. There were others eventually, you know, after, you know, 1865 and, you know, years after that. But this one was the first where, you know, they did everything They were completely self-governed and were able to kind of do their own thing. And it was really a test that the Lincoln and the government wanted to give to even see if they could be self-sufficient, and so when a lot of northern, and I'm sure you've heard, a lot of Northerners came down and were educating and whatnot. That's where they were coming to. They were coming to the South because the Union Army was here, and they started that process. And it's all part of a time called the Port Royal experiment, because the Hilton Head area is called Port Royal,
Right.
the area. So it's the Port Royal experiment. So there are a lot of things that came out of there that you may have heard of. 40 acres and a mule.
Yep.
That was a Port Royal experiment.
Wow.
The Freedmen's Bank Bureau.
Mhm. Yeah, I do.
That was a Port Royal experiment.
Wow.
Mitchellville, all of those kind of things were part of, let's see, if they can do, what they can and be self-sufficient and take care of themselves, given the opportunity. A lot of it failed. Like the Freedmen's Bureau, that fell apart, years after a lot of Black people lost their money.
Yeah.
The 40 acres and a mule, they said that there was a point where some people did get 40 acres and the mule was like the leftover Union Army stuff. But when Lincoln was assassinated, they pulled it all back and took the land back. So nobody got their 40 acres and a mule.
Yeah.
So, but at least during Lincoln, it was an opportunity and a chance for Reconstruction, and that was the whole Reconstruction time, or part of the Reconstruction plan. And if things had continued and were able to finish based on the plan, who knows how Black Americans, would be doing today.
Mm-hmm.
Based on, some of the things that they thought of. But that's a whole nother conversation.
Do you think that after they seen that city prosper or do well on their own, that made them afraid of what could be?
No, not at the time. The reason why Mitchellville did not survive, and it only lasted for about 5 or 6 years, but the reason why it didn't was because the military was here. And so when the town was established, each family was given land, and they were given the supplies to build a house. And so they could farm, their own crops and whatever, and they could sell whatever talents they had. So if someone was a seamstress or, fishermen or growing crops, whatever, they could sell it, but they were selling it to the Union Army. When the war was over, the Union Army left. And so, the prosperity that Mitchellville had essentially left. People stayed on the island, but instead of staying in Mitchellville, they just kind of scattered around the island. They stayed, but it just didn't last. So it wasn't some other reason. I mean, there are a lot of reasons behind it, but primarily that's what happened. The Army left, and so the cash cow left too.
Wow, that's a nugget. I mean, just learning that kind of tells you why, like, because money was flowing in that. Wow, that's very interesting. Let's talk a little bit again about that history. Like what I read about the basket making and different things like that. Let's talk about that history again and some of that culture. What are some of those cultural nuances of that area? Whether it's basket making or something else that maybe people don't know about.
Well, it's interesting. Today, if you wanted a sweetgrass basket, you could get one for $100, $300. I mean, it's a beautiful piece of art as we see it today. Mm-hmm. But back then, it was functional. It was what they used to sift rice. A big basket, kind of like a wok shaped. Mm-hmm. That's what they used to sift the rice. It was functional. It was a part of living. And so, talents to be able to make baskets, it's one of those traditions that hasn't been handed down. Just like the net making for the fishermen, it's a real talent. When the men would, and let me back up for a second, because the roles were really traditional. The men fished, the women took care of the house, and and the children. Sometimes the women would help, with the crops and things like that, but it was really just cut and dry. The men did their thing, the women did their thing. So, the skills, most net making was done by men. Basket weaving was done by men. The quilt making, that was something that was done by the women.
Okay.
And let me tell you something a little bit about the quilt making. The quilts were not just a blanket to keep you warm. During enslavement, what they did was, those quilts were made from old clothes, ripped clothes or whatever, but they were telling a story. So some of the quilts were either telling or remembering life in Africa to treasure it for, future generations, or they were ways of figuring out how to run away. Like, if you're going to the water, like, each block could be woods to the water, to the river, it was coded information. So it wasn't just a random, let's throw some fabric together. They all had a real meaning behind them. And, some of them were made specifically, like if someone was a midwife, and they were, delivering babies, or the local herbalist who was, helping with medicine and things like that. Sometimes they were specific to, to those things, but for the most part, they were informational.
Mm-hmm.
So there's a lot. There's so much.
Yeah. And is it okay if you give your website once again for people who
Oh,
want
absolutely.
Yeah. What is that website again?
Absolutely. The website is lowcountrygullah.com. And I'm also on social media. You can find me Twitter, YouTube, Facebook, Instagram, LinkedIn. So I'm always posting information, stories and articles and things like that. Before we got on here, I am finishing up my third documentary. This one is on Harriet Tubman, from the railroad to a spy. So that story, because Harriet Tubman was on Hilton Head at one point, and she was one of the first, well, not one of, she was the first Black woman to be involved with the Union Army and help strategize and plan a military operation. So that's what that documentary is on. And so I have a lot of documentaries and even video shorts on YouTube, which is also under Low Country Gullah. Everything is Low Country Gullah, social media wise. But if you go on YouTube, I do one on the story of rice, so that you can see, the history of rice and how important it was to the culture. I did one on the quilts, so there. Slave Bible, you name it. There's a whole bunch of stuff. And there's even one on Juneteenth, and there's another one on Mitchellville. So, if you want to do a deeper dive into Mitchellville and Juneteenth and all of that, I definitely have the documentaries. So you could check out the YouTube channel there.
I just want to make sure I throw that out for people who are listening and want to get more information.
Yeah, I appreciate that.
One fascinating thing with, and I want to go a little bit longer, but I'm also mindful of your time. The thing with the quilts that's fascinating is, I remember from my great grandparents' generation, the teaching of making quilts, and some of them would be different colors and different patterns. That's fascinating that realistically that came from there. Were the women into making clothes, and was that a normal type of thing as well?
Yes.
Yeah, I think, did you mute yourself?
No, I didn't. You can't hear me?
Okay, you back. I got you. I'm sorry.
Okay. Yeah. Yes. The answer to that is yes. Just like today, if someone is a carpenter or if someone is a seamstress, if that's what you're good at, that's what you did.
Hmm.
And so, yes, their clothes, the quilts, the quilting was the time of day where, say, the women could get together and talk and share and that kind of thing. So yes, if there was someone who was good at making clothes,
Hmm.
they were the one who made the clothes for everybody. And the nice thing about the culture is that not only is it a face-to-face culture, in that a lot of things aren't written down. So it was the elders talking to, sharing those stories just like we do now.
Hmm.
But the culture was also, if I had, you had, whatever I had, you had. So if I grew crops and you fished, you give me fish, I give you crops. If I made clothes and you built boats, whatever it was. And they just shared. They just shared and provided for each other and really took care of each other. And that was the way of Gullah life,
Hmm.
that you give to get. And it's a beautiful thing. It's a beautiful thing, because it was really the structure of African village. That is exactly how Gullah life was. And even on Hilton Head today, there is the Gullah elders are part of the leadership.
Hmm.
And there are leaders who kind of come together and discuss things in support and betterment of the community. So that's still going on right now.
Hmm.
So a lot of those traditions, even though it may have been spread out and watered down or whatever, it's still going on today.
And I think the power with that is, to be honest, I don't know many women, younger women my age, and I know there are some, so you don't want to make a broad statement, but I don't know how many are into making quilts and sewing. I really feel, even in Dallas has a deep African American history going back to the 1900s to what the 1950s. And then, I mean, historic black communities, Hamilton Park, stuff like that. And it started to deteriorate, whether they built lakes and different highways, really messed up a lot of neighborhoods. Um, I almost forgot what I was about to say, but I was going to say, what it's kind of hurtful that some of the disconnect has started. How do you think my generation can kind of bridge it together in a way?
In a word, ask.
Okay.
Right now, a lot of the elders, they're dying off.
Yeah.
And for me, there's so many questions. My grandmother is still alive. She just turned 97. So I've been bugging her.
Yeah. Yeah.
Like,
No, that's
tell me,
great.
tell me, tell
Yep.
me, tell me,
Yep.
as much as I can. But that's what you have to do. And if I knew what I know now, 10, 20 years ago, I would have started, tell me, because, years ago, I mean, my grandmother understands now the importance of it to me, but before it was just like, yeah,
Yeah.
I don't need to tell you,
Yep.
whatever.
Yep.
Yeah, I had my life, I lived my life, and that kind of thing.
Hmm.
But you really have to push for it.
Yeah.
And see, Gullah culture is a face-to-face culture. So if you don't take that time, and one of the things that is prevalent with the elders, and I'm sure you grew up with this because it's definitely a black thing, when the adults are speaking, children be quiet.
Yep.
That's Gullah. It's called little pigeon, big ears. That they're listening, but it's the information isn't shared. So as young people, you got, if you don't ask, you will never know. And
Hmm.
if the information dies, it just dies. And one of the things that truly hurts my heart is that the Gullah language is something that it's going away,
Wow.
and Gullah culture is one of only a few indigenous cultures in America. Think about that.
Yeah, that's deep. Yeah.
That's deep.
Yep. Wow.
I mean, you're talking about the Indians, you're talking about the Gullah. I don't think, not as far as I know, I don't think there's anybody else. So, so the language and the culture, it's our job to keep it going. It's our job to learn. It's our job to know. And I mean, it's a beautiful thing to make that connection, but soak it all in and share it. Share it, share it, share it. That's why I do what I do. Because, with the Gullah language, when, at least a lot of the people who speak it or have spoken it, they stopped speaking it because they were told they sounded ignorant or backwards. And so, and they were made to seem that they should be ashamed of speaking that way. That's not the case. Just like Gullah, if you've ever heard it spoken, sounds just like the Jamaican patois. So, they're very similar because they're both Creole-based languages. But if no one speaks it, it's gone. And if it's gone, then, what do we have? What do we have? So it's important. You gotta ask. You gotta ask. You gotta know, and you can't assume. Please don't assume that they're going to teach it to you in school, because I have a degree in Black history. I never heard of Mitchellville. Harriet Tubman and the Combahee River Raid. Freeing 750 people. Never heard of it. That's why I'm doing that documentary, because it was stuff that I learned, and I'm like, if most people probably don't. So you have to push yourself and gather up as much as you can, and then share it with somebody.
All righty, guys, you're tuning to the Hoodscout podcast. We're 45 minutes in. We're going to end shortly. I got a few more questions, so I don't want to be long-winded, but okay. So we're going to go close, probably close to an hour.
That's fine.
I want to say this, two points, but just I want first, you mentioned school twice. What college did you go to?
Southern Illinois University in Carbondale.
Okay, great. I want to ask you, what were the careers of the men? Like, what were the skills of the men? What were the men known for? We talked about fishing, but was it any other skills that they were primarily known for?
Absolutely. I mean, primarily it was fishing and farming.
Okay.
Those were the two big ones. But you had blacksmiths, you had iron workers, you had bateau makers, and a bateau is the kind of boat that they use to go fishing in. So, you had skilled people or skilled men who were making bateaus. So, whatever the needs were, if it was a wagon wheel or building a house, and, when just when someone needed, let's say, anything, a boat, a house, or whatever, the community would come together, they'd build a house. Wow. If you knew how to put the structure together, and you knew how to build the door, and you knew how to, get the windows, that everything was interconnected, so that they were always helping each other do what was necessary. So you name it. And the thing is that the people who were captured in West Africa, they came with skills. They were literally the best of the best. They were specifically targeted for what they could do. If they could make brick, if they could, do the trunk works for rice, they were very specific. One of the things that is really interesting is that when it came to rice harvesting, that was the women's job. That was primarily left to women, because it's backbreaking work. You have to, I don't know if you've ever seen a rice plant, but it's like long and kind of looks like, if you ever see grass that grows really tall and then it gets the seeds on top, kind of looks like that, like the top of it. So they would have to take something and cut the bottom off, and then, but all of those little seeds that were at the top, they would have to separate it. So they were like, pounding it and sifting it to get the seed out of the hull, that kind of thing. So it all depended on what your skill set was. But again, it was a village. So, whatever, who had what, we all just came together and, did what was necessary.
And you talk about kind of like how frustrating it is, but the next generation things getting lost. I believe in my heart, the youth are gonna come back to that old style. I believe that it's gonna be a rebirth. I really do.
I think it's already happening.
Yeah. I do. I really believe that. Let's talk about that documentary. How when did that first come to your mind, and how was it making it? What was that process like making your documentary?
Which one?
the latest one. The latest one. I'm sorry.
The current one?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, so first of all, Harriet Tubman is my shero.
Okay.
I think that she, first of all, I'm a Marvel fan, so that's how I think. She could have been one of the Marvel, characters. That's how cool she is as a person. And because I knew some of the things that she had done, everybody knows about the railroad, but that's about it. She was instrumental in getting the enslaved men into the U.S. colored troops. It was because of her and Frederick Douglass and a few other people who literally went to Lincoln and said, we could do this. You need people. There's millions of Black people, who are ready to help you. So there were just so many things. And when the movie Harriet Tubman came out, I don't know if you saw it or not. I guess it was 2 or 3 years ago, maybe 4, whatever. But when it came out, I was really excited about seeing it, because I'm like, finally, someone's doing something big on the screen, and the story is going to be told. And I was so disappointed.
Wow. And let me stop you. The reason I didn't see it, because I heard different pushback. I'm sorry. Go ahead.
No, you're fine. So when I saw it, it pissed me off so much that I wrote 2 reviews on it. And then I thought about it. And, this is the 3rd documentary. And I said, you know what, if I'm going to tell a story, I need to tell Harriet's story. And so, yes, I talk about, where she was born. Yes, I mentioned the railroad and, some of the things that she did. But I go into the stuff that most people don't know about, and I don't want to spoil it for you.
Oh, yeah. Okay.
But it's kind of like mind blowing what she did, how she lived, the contributions that she gave to not only the Union Army, but to America. I had to. It was like, I had just had to get it out there. So, to me, it's one of those must do's that it was just in the making. So, you'll have to watch it and let me know what you think after you see it. It is premiering this Friday on the island on Hilton Head, but next week, starting on the 28th, I'm going to upload it to YouTube. So anybody who wants to watch it from next week on, it'll be on the Low Country Gullah YouTube channel. Just search Harriet Tubman in the channel.
I'm gonna be sure to subscribe to your channel. Is there any museums or things within that area that teach about the Gullah history, whether it's in the South Carolina or the Carolina area? Any museums that kind of would help with that?
There are several. On Hilton Head, there's a Gullah Museum. In Georgetown, South Carolina, where the rice culture was king, let's call it. There's a Gullah Museum there. There is Mitchellville. Mitchellville is actually a park now, and they have been digging and finding artifacts. So they're still in the process of trying to put everything together. But within the next few years, it's going to be, something huge. And also in Charleston, there's a new museum. It's the International African American Museum.
Wow.
That's coming this year. And that is in Charleston on the location of Gadsden's Wharf, where the slave ships actually docked. So it's literally on the location where ancestors not only walked, but they were sold. So it's going to be a really powerful, powerful, powerful place to go. So if you're ever in, in the Charleston area, definitely, those four are definitely places to see. And there's another one in Pinpoint Museum that's just outside of Savannah. And that's, another Gullah museum.
Wow, good information. We're going to end on these two questions, I believe.
Sure.
Is the diet of the Gullah people in that area still traditionally the same, or has it changed a little bit? And if it is the same, what is the diet? I know a lot of food, a lot of seafood, but I want to hit on that one more time about that diet, what they eat, what they ate, and things of that nature.
Well, Gullah food is really Southern cooking.
Okay.
So if you eat Southern food, that's Gullah food.
Okay.
So, the greens, the lima beans, red rice, white rice, chitlins, pig feet.
Oh, pork. I didn't know that.
Yes.
Wow.
Yes.
I didn't know that. I didn't think they ate a lot. I thought it was a lot of fish and soup and shrimp and things. I didn't know they ate a lot of pig feet and stuff like that as well. There's
a lot more seafood because they were on the water. It was easy to get, but that's not all they ate.
Okay.
So, they ate what they were given. And so it is a combination. One thing I will tell you that was different about the Gullah is that on the coast, they were able to work under what is called a task system of slavery, which meant that if you let's say your job was to field rice, so if you were able to do your work from, say, 7 o'clock in the morning till 5 o'clock in the afternoon, or whenever you finished whatever your requirements were, you had the rest of the day to do what you wanted. So they were able to fish for themselves. They were able to, do for themselves. That's part of the reason why when the armies left, they were living, they were doing their thing. In other areas like, of the South further west, it was more of a chattel system, which meant sun up, sundown, you're out there in the field picking cotton, I don't care, just keep going until I tell you to stop. So that's what was really different about the Gullah, is that they were able to hold on to the traditions and the ways that they were familiar, because they all came from different West African countries. But since they were able to blend into not only a language, but maintain those cultures and traditions. And so that's why it's a lot of it is African based, because they had that freedom to do that.
Man, it's amazing. Like the food, like you think, oh, this is just the South, Arkansas, just Mississippi, just Texas. No, that food came right from there, and a lot of us still eat it today. Oh wow!
Have you ever seen High on the Hog?
I didn't, but I've heard a lot about that one. I've heard a lot about that one.
Yeah.
Wow.
It breaks it down like the sweet potato, the yam, the okra, and it literally, it does come to Hilton Head and talks, like really goes into the African food, then the Gullah food, like all the way through to modern day like barbecue. But all of that, it's so well done,
Mhm. Yeah, and that's a very acclaimed documentary, very acclaimed. Let's end on these two ones. We're an hour in, so let's get ready in.
Sure.
Give what advice or what thing would you tell my generation, younger generation, and your generation, like what's some parting wisdom from a historical perspective that we can have going forward?
Well, I guess I mentioned before, push yourself. Push yourself to know, learn who you are. It's really empowering to know who you are and what you can connect to. So that would be the first thing. The second thing that I would say is, Gullah culture was one where we were together. We relied on each other. And if we could get back to that,
Yes.
who knows what we could accomplish?
Yes.
So when you see somebody, say something. Just don't walk by them. Say, hey, how you doing? You don't have to have a 20-minute conversation, but just connect like that. We need to love each other more versus hating on each other.
Yeah.
So those would be my two,
And and that's so powerful. I was just talking to a head coach out of New Orleans, which that's kind of a historic area, if you will, and he was saying traditionally in that tradition you spoke, and in fact, if you didn't speak, it's kind of like what's wrong with you,
right.
So that's all that come from there, though. It's all the same. So
exactly.
Wow.
Just like I'm sure when you grew up that when you went out, if one of your mother's friends saw you doing something, they'd say, hey, I know who you are. I'm gonna go tell your mother. We took care of our kids that way. And that's Gullah. That's purely Gullah. So we need to get back to that. If I see your child acting up, I say something, or in danger or something. But everybody doesn't do that, and we should, because if we don't take care of each other, who's going to take care of us?
Yeah, it truly takes a village. Wow. Well, that's it, guys. I'm thankful that you joined me. I'll be sure to send you a link when we edit this one and get this podcast ready to go. Much success on your documentaries, on everything that you put your mind and your talents to. I pray that it prosper, and enjoy your rest of the day. And thank you so much for joining me.
You're welcome. I really enjoyed it. And if you want me to go into a deeper dive some other time, just let me know.
Yeah, we will. We can go deeper. So I don't know when, but whenever, maybe in the future, we'll have you on again, and we'll keep chipping away, because I just want to, even if I can only reach one person my age, I think that's a victory, and that's what I want to do. That's what I want to do. Okay.
Absolutely.
Hey, thank you. God bless you, and keep up the good fight. Yes, ma'am.
You
Take
too.
care. Yes, ma'am.
Take care.
Yes,
Bye.
ma'am. Bye-bye.